Snow fell in heavy sheets, muffling the world into silence. In the middle of the storm, a little girl crouched inside the broken shell of a bus stop. Her cheeks were red from the cold, lips split, and her eyes swollen with tears. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, weak, abandoned, her long brown hair tangled in knots. She hugged a worn teddy bear against her chest, as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. The storm cut through her torn red sweater. Every gust shook her small frame, but she didn't cry out. Instead, she rocked back and forth, whispering something no one could hear. Her words fogged in the air and vanished just as quickly as they came. From the shadows of the snowstorm, footsteps crunched. At first, the girl shrank back, clutching her teddy tighter, certain that danger had found her again. But then a figure emerged, broad shoulders in a camouflage uniform, face weathered and tired, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion of too many battles. At his side, a German shepherd padded through the snow, muscles taut, ears pricked. The animal's gaze swept the darkness with quiet vigilance. The soldier stopped a few feet away. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he knelt slowly, lowering himself to the girl's height, his breath clouding in the air. His gloved hands were open, showing he carried no threat to her. The shepherd sat obediently, tail resting still, eyes never leaving the girl. "You're freezing out here," the soldier said softly. His voice was hoarse but gentle. "What's your name?" The girl pressed her teddy against her mouth, muffling her answer. "Maya." He nodded once, carefully. "Maya, I'm Mark, and this is Rex." He reached out his hand, not to touch her, but to let Rex inch forward. The shepherd sniffed, then lowered his head in a subtle bow. For the first time that night, Maya's lips trembled into something faintly resembling safety. Mark pulled a thermal blanket from his pack and wrapped it around her frail body. She tensed at first, then melted into the warmth. Rex pressed closer, his fur brushing her knees, a steady wall of heat. The girl looked at the soldier through wide, wet eyes. "Can you take her instead of me?" She lifted the teddy bear, holding it out as if it were alive. "If they come, tell them to take her, not me." Mark's chest clenched. He had seen many things in war, but no battlefield sight had ever cut him so deep. He looked at the girl, frozen, terrified, already bargaining her own life for a stuffed bear. He didn't answer, immediately. He didn't know if he could. "Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories." The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying with it the faint rumble of an engine. Mark stiffened, his instincts firing. Rex's ears shot up, body low to the ground, a growl deep in his chest. "They found us," Mark muttered. He pulled Maya to her feet, steadying her as her knees buckled. "We have to move." The headlights cut through the curtain of snow, sweeping across broken houses and empty alleys. Black sedans, 3 of them, slid into the intersection, their engines idling low and menacing. Maya whimpered. "It's them." Mark's grip tightened around her tiny hand. "Not tonight." He nodded once to Rex, who instantly moved to Maya's other side, guarding her. The first sedan door creaked open. A man stepped out, dressed in a black coat, his shoes shining even in the filth of the storm. His smile was slow, precise, and cruel. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He simply lifted his hand, and the other doors opened in unison. Armed men poured into the snow. Mark guided Maya backward into the alley, his eyes never leaving the threat. Rex growled louder now, a low rumble that vibrated through the cold air. "Stay behind me," Mark whispered to Maya. The girl clutched her teddy tighter, eyes wide, tears freezing on her lashes. "They said they'll always find me." Mark's heart pounded. He didn't know yet what she meant, but he knew one thing. She was telling the truth. These men weren't out here in the storm by chance. They wanted her. And if they wanted her, he would make sure they had to go through him and Rex first. The man in the black coat stepped further into the snow, his smile widening. "We can make this easy, Sergeant," he called, voice cutting clean through the blizzard. "Hand us the girl. No one else needs to get hurt." Mark's jaw tightened. His pistol slid from its holster in one smooth motion, barrel leveled at the advancing shadows. "You'll have to kill me first." Rex's growl became a snarl, his teeth flashing in the dim glow of the headlights. Maya buried her face in the soldier's coat, whispering words that sent ice down his spine. "Daddy said you'd come. But they already killed him." The storm swirled harder, the sedan's engines roaring, the armed men stepping forward into the alley. Mark tightened his grip on the pistol, his other hand steady on Maya's shoulder. Rex crouched low, ready to spring. And the night braced itself for the explosion to come. The first man reached the mouth of the alley with his rifle too high and his chin too proud. Mark squeezed the trigger once. Glass burst from the sedan's headlight behind the gunman, throwing sparks and shadow in equal measure. The man flinched, instincts scattering. "Move!" Mark hissed, pivoting to put his body between Maya and the rifles. Rex surged ahead, a dark streak in the blown snow. The shepherd slammed into a second gunman's thigh, teeth locking fabric and flesh, twisting him off balance. The rifle hit the slush with a dull clatter. Maya stumbled. Mark caught her, one arm lifting the 6-year-old like she weighed no more than the teddy in her hands. The alley split, one path toward boarded storefronts, the other toward the bus depot's service lot. Headlights bled through the whiteout, voices sharpened. "Backlot." Mark chose the dark, angling toward the depot. Rex bounded, then checked himself, glancing back at Maya before taking point. The dog's ears flicked to the smallest sounds, the tick of a cooling engine, boot soles scraping wet asphalt, and translated them into directions only Mark needed. A shot cracked, brick dust stung Mark's eyes. He ducked, felt Maya's breath hitch against his collar. "Eyes on me," he said, calm pressed over fear like a steady hand. "Breathe." Rex cut left around a dumpster, vanished, then reappeared at a sagging chain-link gate. Mark shouldered through, the metal groaning. Snow gave way to the bus depot's underbelly, abandoned bays, shattered fluorescents, oil rainbows frozen into the concrete. "Sergeant!" The smooth voice rolled down the alley like silk over a blade. The man in the black coat hadn't raised his tone at all. "Every step you take closes another door. Hand her over and walk away breathing." Maya squeezed the bear so hard its seams wheezed. "Don't let them make me trade," she whispered into Mark's jacket. "Please." "Not tonight," he said, and meant it with the kind of certainty you can only earn by surviving things that should have killed you. Rex froze at Bay 12, nose skimming air heavy with old diesel. His tail went still, then made one deliberate sweep. "Here." Mark slid behind a dead bus, dropped to a knee and listened. The storm's howl thinned here. Smaller sounds mattered. The distant click of a safety, the whisper of gloved fingers on metal, the subtle settling of snow off a hood. Rex wasn't the only hunter in this building. Maya tugged his sleeve, eyes huge. "Mark, I have to tell you something." "Later," he murmured. He nodded to Bay 12's service hatch, half open, frost rimming the handle. He checked the angle of reflection in a slick of ice. Silhouettes 3 bays down, patient, closing a net. Maya shook her head, tears leaking fresh. "No, now!" "Please." She lifted the teddy, putting the worn muzzle to her lips like a microphone for the smallest voice. "There's a baby." The words hit harder than gunfire. "Where?" "Bus office," she gasped. "Locker with the red sticker. I hid her. I told them to take me instead of her, and they said they would, but they—" Her breath broke. They lied. The world narrowed to 2 coordinates, the gunman's patient advance, and a locker somewhere beyond these bays, with a life inside it. The choice wasn't a choice anymore. Rex looked up, reading Mark's face before the order landed. Mark tapped his thigh twice and pointed. Silent sweep, right hand arc, return. The shepherd slid into darkness, a shadow's shadow. Mark holstered, lifted Maya straighter in his arms. "You did good," he said. "You gave her a chance. We're going to take it." They moved. Mark kept to the line where darkness meets darker, those thin seams where men with rifles search least. He counted beats, not seconds. 3 heartbeats to cross an aisle, 1 heartbeat to breathe, 2 to listen, move again. Maya's fingers were iced through his jacket. He pressed her closer, sharing heat he couldn't spare. The bus office sat in a low annex, windows etched with years of road grime. A door hung crooked on a hinge, a handwritten closed sign still taped at eye level. Mark shouldered it with the gentleness of a thief and the intent of a father. Inside smelled of coffee, turned to tar and rubber older than memory. Rows of grey lockers lined the wall like soldiers who'd forgotten what for. Halfway down, a red sticker leaned, peeling at one corner. 12B. Maya reached for the latch. Her gloves slipped. Mark set her down, blocking her from the door with his hip, pistol back in his hand without thinking. He cracked the locker. A breathy whimper answered, tiny, alive. A baby girl, no more than 8 months, blinked up through layers of scarves. Her cheeks were the tender red of apples pulled from snow. She stirred, smacked her lips, and made that sound infants make when the world is both brand new and already cruel. Maya's sob arrived soft and shattering. "Nina," she breathed. "I told them to take me instead." Mark's vision swam for a half-second. Some old memory of a crib and a voice he hasn't heard in years, but he blinked it clear. "You did the bravest thing I've ever seen." He glanced at the door. "Now we do the unthinkable." He swung the baby into his chest with one arm practiced by instinct he wished he didn't still have. Maya clung to his side, Teddy braced like a standard. He shrugged his pack off, jammed it open, and took out the only tool that had saved him more than once, a bright orange road flare. "Close your eyes on my count," he told Maya. "When you open them, you hold my belt and don't let go for any reason." She nodded, jaw set in that wild, steadfast way children get when they've decided to be brave because they love something more than they fear everything else. Rex ghosted back into the doorway, breath barely lifting his ribs, a streak of frost along his whiskers. 1 soft chuff, left flank. 2. Corridor. 1. The code he and Mark had made over years you measure in scars. "On me," Mark whispered. He cracked the flare. Red light hissed to life, a small sun in the office gloom. He tossed it down the corridor the way a magician throws misdirection, then took the opposite path, a seam between vending machines and a bulletin board of routes. Nobody ran anymore. Shouts followed the red star. Boots thundered where he wasn't. Mark ran where he was, baby tight against his ribs, Maya's grip searing through his belt. Rex led, then fell back, then surged, a metronome to a song called Survive. They hit the east exit. Mark hip-checked the crash bar. The door banged into a wall of storm. Snow knifed in. They plunged into it. Night swallowed the flare's last breath behind them. Across the lot, engines revved, but in the blizzard sound lies. The nearest threat might be far, the far one close. Mark angled toward the row of plough mounds, white mountains thrown up by the city's last attempt to pretend it controlled winter. He slid along their lee, the baby's warmth leaking into him, Maya's too, a chain of heat and need and vow. A shape broke the white, black coat, perfect posture, that smile like a promise he'd never keep. Keane didn't raise a gun. He raised his voice, calm and precise. "You've complicated something simple, Sergeant. 1 child for the cure of many. Do you know how history will judge you?" Mark's answer came out like gravel. "I don't work for history." He shifted the baby to the crook of his arm, freed his hand and fired twice, not at Keane, but at the ground between them. Snow leapt. Keane didn't flinch. The men around him did. Rex exploded out of the drift like a shell from a buried gun, slamming a rifle sideways. A bullet stitched sparks across a plough blade instead of the space where a child's head had just been. "Go!" Mark barked. They cut for the fence line. chain link glinting like a cruel idea. He tossed the baby up to his shoulder, set his boot in a cross-brace, and went up one-handed, the way a much younger man had once climbed helicopter skids with a wounded private across his back. "Hands!" Maya cried from below, eyes huge at the height. "I've got you," he said. And somehow he always did. He dropped, caught her under the armpits, swung her weight over, then reached back for Rex's collar. As the shepherd took the fence like a runner takes a ribbon, they hit the far side in a spill of limbs and breath and snow. Headlights lunged for them like wolves, closer now, angrier. Keen's voice floated, unhurried. "They always run. They always tire." Maya looked up, tears cutting clean lines on a face smudged with storm. "He won't stop." "No," Mark said, "neither do we." They ran. Not far away, a bell tolled from somewhere in town. 1, 2, 3, faint through the weather, as if a porch light had learned to speak. Maya's fingers tightened. "Ruth," she whispered, a name without context to Mark but full of warmth to her. "She leaves the light on." "Then we find that light," he said, lungs burning. "And we make our own if we have to." They reached the cut-through behind an old hardware store, a narrow chute of brick that breathed warmer air like a secret. Mark ducked inside. Rex wedged his body across the entrance, buying them 3 heartbeats with muscle and will. In the small shelter of the passage, the baby stirred and let out a hungry, indignant wail. Life's announcement that it refuses to be quieted. Maya kissed her sister's forehead, tears falling onto soft skin. "I told them to take me instead," she said, voice small, fierce. "I meant it." Mark met her eyes. "I know." On the street, engines idled into a new arrangement. Keen was tightening the ring. Snow sifted down from a lintel above them like shaken flour. Mark adjusted the baby's scarf, tucked it tighter. He could feel both girls' hearts against him, one fast as a drum, one rabbit quick. He set his back to the wall, looked at Rex, and lifted 2 fingers. The shepherd's tail moved once, ready. "Last run," Mark whispered. We reached the light. He pulled Maya close, baby closer, and listened for the space between footfalls that meant now. When it came, he went, a soldier threading 2 miracles through the teeth of the storm. Behind them, Keen's men poured into the lot they'd just abandoned. In front, somewhere, a church lamp glowed, thin but stubborn, and over the scream of the wind, Maya's voice rode steady as a prayer. "Please, please don't let them take us back." The church bell that Maya had whispered about tolled again, faint but steady through the storm. Mark ran toward it, each step digging into the snow as if the world itself wanted to pull them down. The baby cried against his chest, tiny fists thrashing beneath the scarf. Maya stumbled beside him, clutching her teddy with one hand and Mark's belt with the other, her small body shaking, but her will unbroken. Rex cut a path ahead, his dark fur coated in frost. Every few strides he paused, ears sharp, reading the storm for danger. Then he surged forward again, his paws pounding like a drumbeat guiding them through chaos. Behind them, engines groaned. Keen's men weren't giving up. Their headlights swept the blizzard, carving through the white void, beams bouncing off ice-crusted windows and abandoned cars. Mark's lungs burned. He wasn't a young man anymore. Every step carried the weight of too many battles, too many ghosts. But tonight he carried something greater than himself. They reached the old town square. Statues half buried in snow leaned like broken sentinels. The church stood beyond, its steeple black against the grey sky, a faint golden glow flickering from one narrow window. Maya gasped, tears streaming hot down her cheeks despite the cold. "Ruth! She's there!" "Keep moving," Mark said, though his voice was more to himself than to her. The heavy oak doors groaned when he pushed them open. Warm air rolled out, scented faintly of candle wax and old wood. Inside, pews stretched in neat rows, most empty, shadows heavy between them. At the altar, a single woman in a shawl knelt before the cross. Her hair was silver, her back bent but unbroken. She turned at the sound of the door. Her eyes widened when she saw them. Mark with the baby, Maya clinging to his side, Rex looming like a shadow behind. "My God," she whispered. "They told me you were gone." Maya broke free and ran, crashing into her with a sob. "Ruth!" The older woman embraced her, rocking her gently. "Child, I prayed for you every night." She looked up at Mark, at the baby stirring in his arms. "And who is this?" "Nina," Maya choked out. "They wanted her. I told them to take me instead." Ruth's face hardened with sorrow and fury. "Evil!" she spat. "To hunt children like lambs." Mark laid the baby in Ruth's arms for a moment, then moved to secure the doors. He slid the heavy iron bar into place, then checked the windows. "They're on our heels." "We don't have much time." Rex padded to the entrance, planting himself there, a sentinel against the storm. Maya clutched Ruth's shawl, voice trembling. "Daddy said someone would come." He said, "A soldier with a dog, that's you, isn't it?" Mark froze, his hand still on the window frame. He turned slowly, eyes meeting hers. "He said that?" She nodded fiercely, tears shining in her lashes. "But they killed him." "They said he was dead." Ruth's hand stilled on Maya's shoulder. She looked at Mark, her gaze heavy with something she hadn't spoken yet. "Child, men like your father, they don't fall so easy. If he told you to trust, then trust." Before Mark could ask more, Rex's growl cut through the silence. The sound of tires crunching snow filled the square outside. Shadows moved past the stained glass windows. Keen's voice, low and calm, carried through the wood as though the storm itself obeyed him. "Sergeant," he called, "do you think walls will save you?" "How many sanctuaries have I burned already? Hand over the girls and I'll spare the old woman." Ruth's lips pressed into a line. She lifted the baby higher, rocking her gently, eyes bright with defiance. "He underestimates the power of faith," she whispered. Mark checked his pistol, chambered around. His jaw was set, but inside his chest his heart hammered. He looked at Maya. Her eyes begged the question she was too scared to say aloud. "Can we survive this?" He crouched in front of her, one hand steady on her shoulder. "Listen to me, Maya. No one takes you. No one takes Nina. Not while I'm breathing." Her lip trembled. "What if they hurt you?" He forced a small, weary smile. "Then Rex will bite harder." The shepherd barked once, sharp and certain, as if to seal the promise. The first blow hit the doors, shaking the frame. The second cracked wood from the hinges. Rex snarled, teeth bared, body low, ready to spring. Mark lifted his pistol, eyes narrowing on the splintering wood. He whispered to Maya without looking back. "Hold your teddy tight. No matter what happens, don't let go." The third blow burst the doors inward. Snow and headlights spilled into the church, armed men flooding the aisle. Keen entered last, his coat immaculate, his smile unbroken. "Take them." "Alive," he ordered. Mark fired first. The church filled with muzzle flashes and echoes, snow mingling with gun smoke, Rex leaping into the fray like a shadow with teeth. Ruth cried out, clutching the baby tight, dropping behind the altar for cover. Maya clutched her teddy and whispered through sobs, "Please don't send us back. Please, God, don't let them take us back." Gunfire ripped through the nave, splintering pews into showers of wood. The stained glass windows exploded inward as stray rounds cut through colored panes of saints and angels. Candles toppled, wax spilling like blood across the altar. Mark fired in measured bursts, each shot precise, controlled, buying inches of time. Rex hurled himself at the nearest gunman, slamming him to the ground, teeth locking onto his forearm until bone cracked. The man's scream echoed off the vaulted ceiling, drowned out by the chaos. Maya screamed and ducked behind a pew, clutching her teddy with both arms. Ruth slid to the ground behind the altar, shielding the baby with her shawl as if fabric could become armor. "Lord, shield these little ones," she prayed, her voice trembling but steady. Keen moved forward, calm as always, unhurried even as his men fell. His coat swayed as though he were walking into a meeting, not a firefight. "Careful," he ordered. "We want the children breathing." Mark emptied his clip, ducked behind a shattered pew, and slammed another magazine home. His eyes flicked to Maya, then to Ruth. He had to get them out, but the front was lost. "Maya!" he shouted over the din. "With me! Now!" The girl hesitated, her face pale, but Rex bounded back to her side, nudging her leg with his muzzle. That small touch snapped her out of her terror. She crawled fast, clutching her teddy, sliding beside Mark. "Basement," Ruth gasped, pointing to a trapdoor behind the altar. "Old tunnels built during the war. They lead to the river." Mark covered her with suppressing fire, then sprinted with Maya under his arm, Rex at his flank. He reached the altar, threw the trapdoor open, and gestured. "Go!" Ruth passed the baby down first. Mark climbed in after with Maya, then hissed for Rex. The shepherd leapt gracefully through the opening, just as a bullet chewed the altar above. The tunnel was narrow, its stone walls dripping with moisture, the floor slick with decades of neglect. Mark slammed the hatch closed above them. The sound of gunfire muted instantly, replaced by the close echo of their ragged breaths. Their footsteps splashed in ankle-deep water as they hurried. Maya clung to Mark's sleeve, her teddy dragging damp against the stone. "Are we safe?" Mark shook his head. "Not yet. Keep moving." Behind them, wood groaned. A moment later, the trapdoor above burst open. Keen's voice descended cold and cutting. "Find them! Hunt them like dogs!" Rex growled low, fur bristling, but Mark motioned him forward. "Not here." "Boy, we need distance!" The tunnels twisted, branching into endless black corridors. Ruth struggled with the baby in her arms, her breath coming sharp. Mark took the child to free her hands, his strong arms wrapping the infant close as if she were his own. At a bend in the tunnel, he froze. Fresh boot prints stamped the mud, heavy, uneven. Someone had passed here recently. He crouched, fingers brushing the print. Not Keen's men. Then a voice croaked from the shadows ahead. "Maya!" Maya gasped, clutching her teddy to her chest. "Daddy!" From the darkness, a figure staggered forward, leaning on a crutch. His face was gaunt, his uniform ragged, but his eyes, blue, fierce, alive, locked on the child. "Daddy!" Maya screamed, running to him, throwing herself into his arms. He dropped his crutch, cradling her with trembling hands, tears carving through the grime on his cheeks. "I told them you weren't gone," she sobbed. Mark's chest clenched. He had prepared to fight through 100 men, but he hadn't prepared for this. Daniel Hart, Maya's father, was alive. Daniel lifted his gaze to Mark, recognition flickering. You're the soldier with the dog." Mark nodded once. "Your daughter kept her promise. She believed in you." Daniel's lips trembled into a smile before coughing racked his chest, blood speckling his beard. "I've been running, trying to lead them away." "They're close." "Too close." Ruth laid a hand on his arm. "You can't fight like this." Daniel shook his head, clutching Maya tighter. "I won't let them take her." Or the baby. Mark handed him the infant briefly. Daniel kissed the child's forehead with reverence, his tears falling onto her tiny cheeks. "Nina," he whispered, "your mother would have loved you." Then the echo of boots thundered through the tunnels. Keen's men had found the hatch. Daniel's eyes hardened. He shoved the baby back into Mark's arms, pressed Maya into Ruth's side, and staggered toward the bend. He raised his crutch like a weapon, fury etched into every trembling line of his body. "They'll have to go through me." "No," Mark said firmly, stepping beside him, pistol ready. "They'll have to go through us." Rex bristled at his leg, ready to tear into shadows. Maya clutched Ruth, eyes wide with terror. "Daddy, please." Daniel looked back once, his face lit by the flicker of Ruth's candle. His voice broke, but his resolve didn't. "I love you, Maya, and I will never stop fighting for you." The tunnel roared with approaching boots. Muffled voices shouted, rifles clinked. Mark raised his weapon. Rex lowered into a crouch. Daniel's crutch lifted high. The enemy was seconds away, and the battle in the dark was about to begin. The tunnel shook with the sound of boots pounding closer. Water dripped from the stone ceiling, each drop loud as a gunshot in the silence before violence. Mark pressed his back to the wall, pistol raised. Rex crouched at his heel, lips pulled back in a snarl, ears locked forward. Daniel leaned on his crutch, breath shallow, but his eyes burned like a cornered wolf. Ruth pulled Maya and the baby behind a crumbling arch, shielding them with her shawl. Maya clutched her teddy so tightly the seams threatened to split. Her whisper was raw and broken. "Please, please don't let them take us." Mark glanced at her, then back at Daniel. "We don't have long. When I fire, you run with them." Daniel shook his head, jaw tight. "I'm not running anymore. I've been running for years. Tonight I stand. Standing won't save your girls," Mark said. But Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "It'll buy them time." And time is all we've ever needed. The first shadow appeared at the bend. A beam of light slashed across the tunnel walls, catching moisture and stone. Mark fired. The figure dropped, scream cut short. Chaos erupted. Muzzle flashes burst like lightning. Bullets sparked off stone, ricocheting in deafening echoes. Rex launched into the fray, a blur of muscle and teeth, dragging one man down before another could aim. Daniel swung his crutch like a spear, smashing it into a rifle barrel, forcing the attacker back. His chest heaved, but every strike carried the weight of a father who refused to surrender. "Go!" Mark shouted, pushing Ruth and the children deeper into the tunnel. Ruth obeyed, clutching Maya's hand and cradling the baby close, her breath ragged with fear. Mark covered their retreat, his shots methodical. One gunman fell, then another, but for every man down, more filled the tunnel. Keen's voice carried over the chaos, smooth and unhurried, echoing down the stone. "Sergeant, you can't save them all." "Surrender the girls, and I'll let the rest of you walk out alive." "Not a chance," Mark growled. He slammed a fresh magazine into his pistol. Daniel staggered, blood staining his side where a bullet had grazed him. He gripped the wall, then looked at Mark with fierce resolve. "Take them to the river." "I'll hold the line." "No," Mark snapped. "We do this together." Daniel's hand clamped onto his arm, grip iron despite the tremor. "You don't understand. I'm already done. Fever's been killing me for weeks. I knew this day would come. Let me do this for them." Maya's scream cut through the gunfire. "Daddy!" Daniel's eyes softened, just for her. He forced a smile that trembled at the edges. "I love you, baby girl." More than life. Then he shoved Mark hard, forcing him down the tunnel after Ruth. Before Mark could recover, Daniel turned back toward the oncoming soldiers, gripping his crutch like a weapon of destiny. He roared, a sound that carried through stone and storm alike, and charged. Mark's heart split, but he obeyed the unspoken command. He scooped Maya into his arms as she fought against him, sobbing and screaming for her father. Rex growled, torn between following Mark and going back, but Mark barked a command. "With me, Rex!" The shepherd obeyed, reluctantly, his body quivering with the urge to return to the fight. Behind them, the tunnel became an inferno of sound. Gunfire, Daniel's roar, men shouting, stones splintering. Ahead, Ruth stumbled toward a faint circle of light. The river. They burst from the tunnel mouth onto the icy bank. The river surged dark and wide, half frozen, carrying chunks of ice downstream. The cold wind howled, but freedom lay just across the water. Mark lowered Maya, who collapsed into Ruth's shawl, sobbing uncontrollably. He pressed the baby tighter against his chest, her cries small but sharp in the night. Rex stood at the tunnel mouth, ears back, growling at the chaos within. Then came silence. Not peace, silence. The gunfire stopped, the shouting ended. Only the river's roar filled the air. Maya's sobs quieted. She looked at Mark, her voice breaking. "Daddy?" Mark couldn't answer. He wanted to tell her Daniel was still fighting, still alive, but the truth weighed too heavy. A single figure emerged from the tunnel. Not Daniel. Keen, his black coat was unmarked by dust or blood. His smile was intact, cold and precise. Behind him, his men spread out, rifles raised. Mark lifted his pistol, hands steady despite the storm in his chest. Rex bared his teeth, growling like thunder ready to break. Keen's gaze flicked to Maya, then the baby in Mark's arms. It seems the father has given you a head start. Noble, but futile. Hand them over. Maya clutched her teddy, whispering through tears, "Please don't send us back." Mark stepped forward, putting his body between Keen and the children. His voice was iron. "You'll have to kill me first." Keen's smile sharpened. "That can be arranged." The night froze in place, the river roaring, the snow swirling, the promise of blood heavy in the air, and the unthinkable choice loomed closer with every breath. Snow swirled harder across the riverbank, stinging Mark's face like shards of glass. He planted his boots in the frozen mud, pistol trained squarely on Keen. Behind him, Ruth huddled with Maya and the baby, clutching them close as though her thin shawl could turn into steel. Rex crouched low, a snarl rumbling deep in his throat, the fur along his spine bristling. His eyes were locked, not on the soldiers fanning out along the bank, but on Keen himself, as if the dog instinctively knew the true predator in the pack. "Sergeant," Keen said smoothly, his voice unshaken by the storm, "do you know what those girls are worth? Not to me, not to my men, to the world." His gloved hand gestured to Maya, then to the baby. "One can heal. The other can perfect. You're guarding the future, and you don't even understand it." Mark's grip on his pistol tightened. "They're children, not medicine?" Keen smiled thinly. "The difference is only a matter of perspective." He took a slow step forward, boots crunching the snow. "You're a soldier. You know sacrifice. Give me one of them, and I will let the rest of you go." The world will call you a hero for making the hard choice. Mark didn't answer. He could feel Maya trembling behind him, her small hand clinging to his coat. Then her voice, soft and broken, floated up. "Can you take her instead of me?" The words struck like a bullet. Mark turned, stunned. Maya held out her teddy, pushing it toward him with shaking hands, just like she had in the bus stop. But this time her eyes flicked to the baby in Ruth's arms. Her lips quivered. "Take Nina, don't take me," Ruth gasped. "Maya, no!" Keen's smile widened, cruel delight flashing in his eyes. "Children understand more than we give them credit for." Even she knows some lives are worth more than others. Mark knelt quickly, gripping Maya's shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Don't you ever say that again. Do you hear me? Your life is not less." Not ever. Maya's tears spilled hot against the cold air. "But she's a baby." "She hasn't even had a chance. I thought if I gave myself, maybe they'd let her grow." Ruth shook her head fiercely, whispering prayers under her breath. Mark swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her Daniel would come back. He wanted to promise her they'd all make it out. But he couldn't lie. All he had was the truth. He would not trade one child for another. He rose, turning back toward Keen. "You get neither." Keen sighed, as though disappointed in a stubborn child. He raised his hand. Rifles clicked into readiness all around. Mark took one deep breath. Then he gave Rex the signal. The shepherd lunged forward like a missile, crashing into the nearest gunman, dragging him down into the snow. Mark fired 3 quick shots, dropping 2 others before they could adjust. He pivoted, grabbed Maya with one arm, and shoved Ruth toward the river. "Go! Move!" Bullets snapped through the air, chewing into the bank. Ruth stumbled but kept her grip on the baby. Maya clung to Mark's waist as he half dragged her toward the water's edge. The river churned dark and wild, jagged with slabs of ice. Crossing it was madness, staying was death. Mark didn't hesitate. He shoved Maya into Ruth's arms, then waded in, icy water biting like knives through his clothes. He reached back, lifted the baby into his chest, then pulled Ruth after him. "Keep moving!" he shouted over the roar. Rex barreled into the river beside them, teeth flashing as he snapped at a soldier who reached too close. Blood streaked the current, carried away in seconds. Gunfire sprayed the surface, sending icy plumes upward. Mark kept his body between the girls and the rifles, his breath ragged, each step dragging through the freezing current. His arms ached, his legs screamed, but he pushed forward. Behind them, Keen stood on the bank, calm as ever, watching. "You can't outrun inevitability," he called. "The river won't save you." Mark ignored him. He focused on the far shore, just a shadow through the snow, but enough. One more step, another, then another. Maya's sobs cut through the storm. "Daddy's not dead," she cried suddenly, voice shrill, desperate, as if the river itself might carry her words to him. "He's not," he promised. The words shattered something in Mark's chest. For a moment Daniel's face flashed in his mind, bloodied but defiant, roaring in the tunnel. He had promised. And maybe, just maybe, promises like that didn't die so easily. With a final heave, Mark shoved Ruth and the children onto the opposite bank. He collapsed after them, chest heaving, limbs shaking from the cold. Rex dragged himself out beside him, fur dripping, eyes blazing with loyalty. Behind them, Keen's men didn't follow. They stood at the far shore, rifles still, waiting for orders. Keen remained perfectly composed, his breath visible in steady, unhurried clouds. He met Mark's eyes across the river. His voice was quiet, but it carried clear. "This isn't finished." Then he turned, and his men melted back into the storm. Mark lay back in the snow, gasping, the baby still pressed to his chest, Maya sobbing into Ruth's shawl. Rex shook himself violently, then pressed his wet body against Maya to warm her. For now, they had survived. But the battle was far from over. The far riverbank was nothing but jagged rock and skeletal trees, their branches clawing at the wind. Mark staggered out of the current, every muscle locked with cold. His breath came in ragged bursts, his chest burning as if he had swallowed fire and ice together. Ruth collapsed onto the snow, clutching the baby tight under her shawl. Maya pressed against her, still crying, still shivering, the teddy clutched like a lifeline. Rex shook himself once, then immediately lay against the girl to warm her, his ribs rising and falling in quick bursts of loyalty. Mark forced himself upright. The storm hadn't let up, and every step they had taken was already being buried under snow. That should have been a blessing. But Keen wasn't the kind of predator who lost prey because of weather. "We can't stay exposed," Mark said hoarsely. He scanned the tree line, his soldier's eye picking out the contours of an old hunting shack half hidden in the drift. There. They stumbled inside, the door groaning against the wind. The shack smelled of dust and rusted traps, but at least it had walls. Mark lowered the baby onto a pile of dry canvas, rubbing her tiny hands until she stopped crying. Maya huddled beside her, whispering, "It's okay, Nina." "Daddy's not dead. Daddy's not dead." Mark knelt in front of her, his voice steady but low. "Maya, listen to me. Your father gave us this chance. We can't waste it. That means you stay quiet, you stay strong." Her eyes brimmed. "But he'll come." "I know he will." Mark swallowed hard, unable to crush the hope in her eyes, even as his chest ached with doubt. "Then we'll be ready for him." Rex suddenly stiffened, ears erect. His growl rumbled like distant thunder. Mark peered out through the cracks in the shack wall. Headlights, 2, then 4, then 6 beams cut through the storm. Keen's convoy had followed them across after all. Mark's jaw tightened. They weren't safe. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Ruth's hands clutched her rosary. "We can't outrun them again," she whispered. "Your body won't last another mile." Mark didn't deny it. His legs felt carved from stone, his chest raw with frost, but he also knew there was no choice. "We buy time. That's all we need." He pulled a flare and a grenade from his pack, souvenirs of wars no one cared to remember. He handed the flare to Ruth. "When I say, light it, take the girls and run north. There's a farmhouse 2 miles past the ridge. If I don't come—" "No," Ruth said sharply, gripping his wrist. "Don't you dare speak that." But Mark only gave her the faintest smile, weary and resolute. The first crunch of boots sounded outside the shack. Rex was at the door before Mark even moved, his body quivering with anticipation. Mark ruffled his ear once. "With me, boy?" The door crashed inward. 2 soldiers entered, rifles raised. Mark fired first. The pistols flashed, turning the shack into a burst of daylight. 1 man fell. Rex lunged at the other, jaws clamping onto his wrist until the rifle clattered away. The shepherd pulled him down, growling with fury. "Now," Mark barked. Ruth struck the flare, its red light spilling across the storm. She grabbed Maya's hand, lifted the baby under her arm, and bolted into the snow. Maya looked back once, her sob cracking the night. "Mark!" But the soldier was already turning, already emptying his magazine into the shadows outside. The world dissolved into chaos. Soldiers fanned out around the shack, muzzle flashes cutting through the storm. Mark ducked, rolled, fired, his body moving on muscle memory older than the children's lives he protected. He wasn't fighting to win, he was fighting to delay. Rex fought beside him, a whirlwind of fur and teeth, slamming into one soldier, then another, forcing them to waste time, waste bullets. Through the storm, Keen's silhouette appeared, immaculate as ever, standing still while his men bled and died. His voice carried, calm and cold. "1 child, Sergeant. Give me 1, and I'll call off the hunt. You know it's the only way." Mark crouched, blood running down his temple from a grazing shot. His pistol clicked empty. He pulled his knife, breath fogging heavy. "Over my dead body." Keen's smile widened. "That can be arranged." At the ridge, Ruth stumbled, her breath ragged, the flare guttering in the wind. Maya clutched her side, dragging the teddy, tears freezing on her cheeks. "We can't leave him," she sobbed. "Child," Ruth whispered, tightening her grip. "Sometimes love means letting go." But Maya shook her head violently. "No, he promised. Daddy promised," the baby whimpered, as if echoing the plea. And far behind them, gunfire thundered one last time, then silence. Maya's heart froze. She pulled against Ruth's grip, screaming into the wind, "Mark!" "Rex!" But only the storm answered. Back at the shack, smoke rose faintly into the storm. Bodies lay half-buried in snowdrifts, rifles still clutched in lifeless hands. Among them, Rex stood bloodied, one ear torn, his chest heaving, but alive. He nosed through the bodies until he found Mark, collapsed, motionless in the snow. The shepherd whined, pressing his head against the soldier's chest. For a long moment, nothing. Then weakly a breath rattled out. Rex barked once, sharp and desperate, before curling tight against his side, keeping him warm. And in the distance, Keen's black coat disappeared into the storm, his voice carried on the wind. "This isn't over." The farmhouse was little more than a silhouette in the storm, its roof sagging under the weight of snow, windows boarded against the wind. Ruth staggered up the final slope, her shawl pulled tight around the baby. Maya stumbled beside her, feet numb, face streaked with frozen tears. She kept looking back. Every few steps her eyes darted to the darkness where the river lay hidden by snow. "He's coming," she whispered. "He has to be." Inside, the farmhouse was abandoned, but intact. A broken lantern sat on the mantel, a pile of old quilts folded in the corner. Ruth lowered the baby onto them, rubbing her tiny hands to keep her warm. Maya collapsed onto the floor, clutching her teddy. Her lips trembled. What if he doesn't?" Ruth's eyes softened, though grief shadowed them. "Child, sometimes the Lord gives us miracles when we least expect them. Hold on to hope. It's the only fire that never dies." The wind howled through the rafters. For a long time, that was the only sound. Then, Rex's bark. Maya shot up, her heart pounding. The shepherd staggered into the farmhouse, bloodied and limping, one ear torn. His chest heaved, his coat matted with snow and crimson. And leaning heavily on him, half-conscious, was Mark. "Mark!" Maya screamed, rushing to him. She threw her arms around his waist, sobbing into his soaked jacket. Mark sank to his knees, one arm wrapping weakly around her. His face was pale, his breath ragged, but his eyes still held fire. "Told you. I don't break easy." Ruth hurried to him, helping ease him onto the quilts beside the baby. She pressed her hands against the wound in his side, her lips moving in prayer. "You should be dead." Not tonight, Mark rasped. Wincing, he reached out, brushing his fingers over the baby's tiny cheek. She's still here? That's enough. Maya clung to him fiercely, her voice muffled by his jacket. I thought I lost you. I couldn't lose you too. He kissed the top of her tangled hair, whispering, You won't. Not while I breathe, but the storm wasn't the only thing pressing against the farmhouse walls. Keen, he arrived without fanfare, his black coat stark against the snow. Only a handful of his men remained, but it was enough. They surrounded the farmhouse like wolves, circling a wounded stag. Inside, Rex growled low, his body quivering with fury, though he could barely stand. Mark forced himself upright, pain flaring bright, but he steadied his pistol. His hand shook, but his aim did not. Keen's voice drifted through the cracks in the walls, calm and precise. You've given them hope, Sergeant. That was your mistake. Hope makes people reckless. It makes them believe they can win. But you and I both know survival is about compromise. He stepped to the door, pushing it open with a gloved hand. Snow swirled in around him, framing him like a phantom. One child, he said again. Give me one child and the rest live. Mark raised his pistol, blood on his lips but iron in his voice. I told you before. You get neither. Keen sighed, as if disappointed in a student. Then this ends the hard way. He nodded to his men. The door splintered inward. Mark fired, dropping one. Rex lunged, slamming into another, teeth sinking deep despite his wounds. Ruth swung a broken chair leg, striking a rifle aside, fierce with the strength of faith and desperation. Maya screamed, clutching the baby tight under her coat. The farmhouse became a storm within a storm. Gunfire, splintering wood, shouts and cries. Mark's pistol emptied, the click echoing like a death knell. He drew his knife, body swaying but unyielding. Keen stepped through the chaos untouched, his smile unwavering. He moved toward Maya and the baby, his gloved hand outstretched. They were always mine. Over my dead body, Mark snarled, pushing himself between them. Keen's eyes gleamed. That's the idea. He raised his pistol, and Rex hurled himself forward, a last surge of loyalty and love, slamming Keen to the ground. The shepherd's jaws closed on his wrist, forcing the gun aside. Keen screamed for the first time, his composure shattering as blood spattered the snow. Mark seized the moment. He drove his knife into Keen's chest, burying it to the hilt. Keen gasped, eyes wide, his smile finally gone. He staggered back, collapsing into the snow, his breath fading into nothing. Silence fell. The surviving soldiers fled into the storm, their leader gone, their will broken. Inside, Ruth sobbed with relief. Maya collapsed against Mark, clutching him, her teddy, and the baby all at once. We're safe, she whispered. Mark's hand shook as it rested on her head. For now, he said, safe enough. Rex limped back to his side, bloodied but alive, tail thumping weakly against the floor. Mark pressed his forehead to the dog's, his voice breaking. Good boy. You saved them all. Dawn broke slowly, the storm finally easing. The farmhouse windows glowed with pale light. Ruth lit candles at the mantel, her lips murmuring thanks. Mark sat in the corner, his wounds bound. Maya curled against him, asleep at last, with her teddy still clutched. The baby stirred softly in Ruth's arms, alive, safe, a fragile miracle. Mark looked at them. The girl who had begged to be taken instead, the baby too young to know the danger she'd survived, the old woman who had carried them through faith alone, and the dog who had given everything without hesitation. His eyes stung, but for once it wasn't from the cold. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. He knew that now. Healing was about building a future together. And though the road ahead would be long, filled with scars and shadows, for the first time in years, Mark believed in tomorrow. Epilogue. Weeks later, the farmhouse had become more than a refuge. It was a home. Ruth tended the hearth, Maya played in the snow with Rex, and the baby slept peacefully in a cradle carved from scrap wood. Mark stood in the doorway watching them, his body still aching, but his heart lighter than it had been in decades. Maya spotted him and ran, flinging her arms around his waist. "You didn't leave," she whispered. He knelt, holding her tight. "Never," he said, "not while I breathe." And for the first time in a very long time, the soldier, the K9 and the children were not just survivors. They were family.